So this goes to follow with all of this female sexuality talk stuff. I was watching Big Think and a short little excerpt on are women neurologically less suited for monogamy than men? Now, monogamy, I think, is a tricky conversation, uh, complicated, as all human things are. But anyway, so the researcher says that according to the research, women and men, they're equal when it comes to levels of attraction and desire. But then over time, evidence seems to point to the fact that men will maintain a level of attraction and desire, and women's levels will drop off sooner and steeper uh, than a man's will. And he says that uh, now he attributes this to socialization, which I tend to agree. I think that he doesn't get too much into the details of the thing, but he says that basically men seem more impervious to the types of things that would cause their desires to wane, whereas women are not. And he attributes that to some form of socialism, or not socialism, but socialization. And I would tend to agree to the extent that I think uh, men are shaped by their desires, driven by their desires, and driven to action by their desires. They have more. I don't mean this in a frivolous way. I mean I think this is a good thing. I think it acclimates them to what it is they truly genuinely want. So they're allowed to pick and choose. They exercise their autonomy through their desire, right? And so they end up probably in a relationship that they actually want to be in. They don't um, you know mince words. They're not catering to some other archetype or climate, or men tend to exercise their and fine tune their desire through their socialization, through their pursuit. Um, so it makes sense to me so basically what that means to me is that they've gone through this process probably as per their socialization a few times, tested out this type, this situation, that scenario, uh, came to a point where they feel pretty confident in the person that they think is a suited partner to them, and probably will be over a long haul. Whereas I think with women, not to say it can't happen or that it doesn't happen or that there are no women who pursue. I think, obviously things get complicated, but we're talking in large sweeping generalities here. So I think the socialization is different for women. I think socially, women are not driven to action through desire. So their desires are not really a factor in the same, or consequential in the same way that a man's desire is. Hopefully, these two things match. You meet a guy, and you both like each other, but the problem is that you don't go through the same process of filtration and the same process of mixing and matching and figuring things out for so as a woman, you're passive in the relationship context. You're generally, it's a passive, uh, it's a type of passive pursuit, which is kind of strange, but it's sort of more passive. And so I think, uh, but that said, and I do tend to agree with this stuff, but I don't know that I correlate it to monogamy in the same way. So yes, I agree that to have desire in your partner makes monogamy much much easier, and much much more likely. That said, I think that where men and women diverge with respect to the monogamous framework is that I don't know that women necessarily, mind you, again, I think desire makes monogamy much, much easier. But because women are not necessarily driven, motivated to action through desire, they're probably also less likely to have desire be the thing that motivates them um, to uh, some sort of alternative action. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's why we come away with this feeling like women are more monogamous than men. I don't know that women are necessarily more monogamous than men, but I do think that women are not necessarily driven by desire, so they won't adversely be driven by lack of desire, is what I'm trying to say. So, assuming that everything else is all right, I think women are more likely. It's not all women. It's not every time, and it's not even necessarily the right thing. I think to simply stick something out, even though you're not necessarily inspired, like you're not really into it. Nevertheless, I think women, uh, historically, on the whole, are probably more likely to stick with the situation despite not necessarily being into the guy physically, um, or having desire in that way. Um, now, is again, I don't think that's true all the time, and I don't necessarily think that's the way to go. Um, I think monogamy is a complicated thing, and I don't think most people. I think monogamy has a purpose, and I believe in monogamous relationships, but I believe that monogamy is not necessarily. I don't think it's unnatural. I think it is natural. It's natural. Again, desire makes it natural, right? Desire and possessiveness make monogamy particularly natural. But is it natural over a long haul? Is it natural in moments of decline? Is it natural under uh, situations of stress? You know, I think all of these things affect monogamy, um, but not the least of which being the socialization around um, desire. In situations where desire starts to wane, um, women, I think, have been socialized to such an extent that, socialized in a way that monogamy is still possible because it becomes a function of trust and friendship, right? Not to say that this isn't true for men, but I think that because they're not, as I say, they're not driven by their desire, they're also not alternatively motivated by lack of desire, right? So once the desire starts to wane, that doesn't necessarily affect the architecture of the relationship, right? The relationship can still stay intact, and in fact, women can still have sex and not necessarily be desirous of the sex, which is usually why you end up in these situations where guys are telling these stories about, you know, oh, you know, it's been 6 weeks since we've had sex. Oh, and women get characterized as not being sexual, but that's genuinely because women have not gone through the same socialization process where sex and desire are concerned, right? So, I mean, not to say that you're not a desirous guy, but women are socialized differently, uh, and uh, and with or without the desire, the framework or the architecture for the monogamy exists for women. But because men, I think, are more driven by desire, and again, they're socialized that way. So their desire allows them to go through this process of filtration and partner, evaluation and all of these things. So he's genuinely with somebody he genuinely desires, probably by and large. Again, not all the time, not every time, but by and large, this is probably true. Um, but he's gotten there through a very different system of socialization than his woman has. Um, now, and so we can applaud that, but we can also see that how, to the same degree that a man's desire may allow him to stay in a relationship, to stay more physically committed to that relationship through desire, that once that desire does wane for him, then that will be a motivating factor for him to leave the relationship, right? Now, uh, I think it's just a process that's different for women. So, and we all want desire, we all expect desire, we all celebrate being attracted and being hot for each other and all of these things. Uh, but a woman's socialization, a woman's expectations, and a woman's architecture for the relationship, particularly for monogamy, I think is different. And I don't think it necessarily requires desire. Like, mind you, it requires a lot of other things. So once desire wanes, do you have a friendship? Can Do you trust each other? Do you talk to each other? Do you have commitment? I think a woman will settle into these secondary, well, not second, these aren't secondary, these are primary for women, right? These are primary um, factors. And assuming that these are still met, desire is You know, I mean, everybody wants it, but again, she hasn't been socialized, or like her um, uh, drives, right, have not been cultivated by desire. Um, and I think all of us recognize that monogamy requires a lot of different things up above and beyond desire. And that assuming that those things are met, the monogamy is still um, achievable and completely gratifying. Uh, but of course, you want desire to be part and parcel of that whole package. And so do I think that women, the question being from this clip, do I think that women are less suited because their desire drops off? No, I don't think monogamy works quite like that. I think we all want desire to be part of our relationships, but I think that women are socialized, as I said in the beginning, while we are not socialized um, to be motivated by desire. Likewise, we won't be. We're socialized um, not to be unmotivated by it or to pursue some other action because it's lacking. So I don't think women are moved by it necessarily one way or another, right? There's a whole other universe of things that women are using to balance an equation, the choices that they're making. Uh, so desire might be part of it, but it's not, again, it's not enough to motivate you in one way or another, towards any sort of action. I think, anyways, as a woman, I think that I've seen enough and heard enough from women who've been hurt multiple times, who've been betrayed multiple times, who've been lied to multiple times, but women are evaluating a bunch of other things in order to create uh, stability, I think. Um, so lack of desire, I don't think, is a thing for women with respect to monogamy. I mean, it can be, certainly. So I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a woman who feels like her relationship is not satisfying because there's no desire there and she wants to move on. That's perfectly fair and valid. But what I'm saying is that I don't know that the statement, that women are not designed for monogamy because of their lack of desire. I don't think that that really uh, um, gives a fair sort of evaluation as to what drives monogamy, right? Or what sort of constitutes, or what the architecture of monogamy requires. And so, no, I don't think that there's a correlation there. I think that women are perfectly. It makes perfect sense to me that women's desire declines steeply and quickly when compared to men, given our socialization. But I don't think that monogamy is for women. It might be for men. For men, this might be a different proposal entirely. But for women, I don't think monogamy is necessarily that relevant. Um, uh, like, I'm sorry, I don't think that desire is that relevant to monogamy for women. I think it's a helpful part of it. It makes for helpful. It makes for healthier, more exciting relationships. But assuming that you have all of these other things going on in the relationship, I think women are fine with monogamy, and I think that that's part of the socialization, and in fact, very much socialized into women to not regard desire as part of their monogamous architecture. So what makes them monogamous is not likely has anything to do with desire, anyways. It's all of this other stuff. It's does does he does he support the family? Does he support you emotionally? Is Are you two friends? Do you trust him? Does he trust you? Do you talk about things? Do you support each other? Do you champion each other? Um, like, what are you building? Right? That's what that's the thing of it. And desire. I don't want to make desire. I don't want to just sort of write it out like it's a complete non-entity. I don't think that, but I just don't think that it's as simple as that. I don't think that that statement, the short, uh, in short, sort of encapsulates um, the relationship that women have with respect to um, what the criteria is for monogamy. I don't think it quite. I don't think that's it. I don't think that desire is really a factor in that way. Uh, Anyways, so yeah, so interesting, but neurologically less, or women neurologically less suited for monogamy than men. No, that's women. I think for that reason are maybe more suited to monogamy than men, because women are not desire is not like even you look at something like The Wedding Singer. We're trying to bring up The Wedding Singer again. You get something like The Wedding Singer. No, not The Wedding Singer. Sorry, that's a different. The Wedding Ringer. Similar title. Sorry, The Wedding Ringer, and the main character in it, he's getting married to this girl, gorgeous girl, and he feels like she's so out of his league and whatever, whatever. But it's interesting that she's, as the movie goes on, you get to see that she's just sort of she's marrying him because she's panicking. Basically, she's not really into him, but uh, it's an interesting idea. You know, this. What she sort of picked him because he seems like a reliable choice. He's simply reliable. And I think that women will make and do make and have made those kinds of choices. I mean, he didn't respond well to it in the movie because once it sort of became clear to him, he was like, "That's not what I want for myself. I want somebody who really desires me. I want the lightning and the thunder and which is I think what we all want really. But I think in practical terms, I think a lot of people do commit to relationships and genuinely commit to them based on a lot of different criteria outside of the lightning and the thunder and that sort of thing. So, and I think that I think women are very familiar with negotiating along those lines, with negotiating their relationships along those lines. So I don't think that that's weird. I don't think that that's um, anything really. I don't think that. So what I'm trying to say is I don't think desire is a indicator of monogamy for women. I think it might be for men. I think, or it plays a stronger role. It's a stronger driver for men than it is for women. I think that's just tends to be true. But anyways.